Good morning, you're watching Daybreak. I'm Nadia Jani.
And I'm Lou Brown, and we're ready to wake you up all you need to know about what is happening across the globe and in the region.
So here are your top stories. US government shutdown enters its 36th day to become the longest in history.
Russian forces appear to tighten grip on strategic Ukrainian city of Pokrovsk.
And Hamas hands over another coffin containing a body of an Israeli captive. First this morning, the US government remains shut down as it enters its 36th day, making it the longest period of time in US history. The closure began on the 1st of October and is due to Congress not being able to agree to new funding.
The implications of this has meant air traffic controllers have had to work without pay, and now the Federal Aviation Administration has ordered a 10% cut in flights at 40 major airports to reduce pressure and maintain safety.
10% of flights at 40 major American airports could be cut from Friday if the US government shutdown continues. That's according to US Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy and the FAA Administrator Brian Bedford. More than 2,100 flights were delayed on Wednesday. It's after the shutdown entered its 36th day on Wednesday, making it the longest in American history. The Transportation Secretary says the reductions are aimed at easing pressure on overworked air traffic controllers.
There'll be frustration. We are working with the airlines. They're going to work with passengers. But in the end, our sole role is to make sure that we keep this airspace as safe as possible. The administrator is going to talk about all of the tools we're going to deploy.
The cuts are expected to impact the nation's busiest airports, including New York, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Atlanta, Los Angeles and Dallas, potentially cancelling up to 1,800 flights and could affect more than 268,000 airline seats. International flights will initially be exempt.
But we do recognize that the controllers have been working fastidiously for the last 5 weeks with this huge burden over their head of lack of compensation. And we are starting to see some evidence that that fatigue is building in the system in ways that we feel we need to work towards relieving some of that pressure.
President Donald Trump said the shutdown is affecting the economy and GOP political standing. Speaking to Republican senators, he pushed for ending the filibuster to speed up legislation.
But countless public servants are now not being paid, and the air traffic control system is under increasing strain. We must get the government back open soon, and really immediately. We have to get it up. We have the hottest economy we've ever had, and it's affecting the stock market now a little bit.
Since the 1st of October, hundreds of thousands of federal workers have gone without pay, and essential services nationwide have been disrupted, putting millions of Americans at risk of losing health and food assistance.
We're now going to take a look at the stories making its way across the globe, and we go first to a news website which is also leading with the US to cut flights by 10% at 40 airports as shutdown reaches its 36th day. Now, as you can see, for a lot of Americans this is actually a big deal, especially for those who work within aviation, and it means not having been paid for a month is quite a big deal, especially for Americans who get paid twice in 1 month. So every 2 weeks they're expecting a paycheck, so they've missed out on 2 so far. And it now is impacting airports. We're going to get a full list of what those airports are later on in the day. But it does mean there is a heavy reduction in flights in that area.
Let's take you through what's the timeline be. So we know from Friday it was 4% of flights cut, then that rose to 5% on Saturday and 6% on Sunday. And next week it's due to rise, like the headline says, to 10% of flights. It's around 3,500, 4,000 per day, and the airports list is to be released on Thursday. We still don't know which major airports those are, but officials say cuts are needed to keep flying safe. So there are so many airlines as well in America, American and Southwest being some of them, who are waiting for details. And Southwest has urged Congress to end the shutdown and get back to a normal scale of flight resumptions. Let's have our next story then, please.
So in Russia, the Russian forces, they appear to be tightening its grip on the strategic city of Pokrovsk. So it's something that we have spoken about previously before. Obviously, the war in Ukraine is continuing even after US sanctions on Russia. But it also seems that military analysis say that this is actually proving that Ukraine is looking in a precarious situation in regards to this particular city. Now, why this city? There is information as to why Russian forces want to appear to tighten its grip. It's trying to take as much territory of Ukraine in regards to negotiating what it wants to take hold of and keep, but we will definitely be focusing more on this story.
Yeah, Pokrovsk is actually quite interesting in itself. That it's one of the only places that has the only place actually that produces coking coal. Sorry, my bad. In Ukraine, so that steel industry is shut down as a result as the start of the war. So Pokrovsk is taking a massive hit to its industry there as well. There was a 60,000. Pre-population to the war that's mostly been evacuated. This city is being seen as a strategic point, like a sort of Russia is seeing it as, if they capture that, then they can go further into the Donbass and move more into an offensive position. There's also an abandoned university there, so symbolic of the eastern Ukraine and what's been happening.
And I just wanted to quickly add to that. I know that there has been talk, especially because Trump has announced that he is going to be doing more nuclear testing. Putin has also stated that he will be doing more nuclear testing, and it's just very, very interesting. As one major country does it, it's now pushing another country, Russia, to also start testing. Now, these two countries had stopped testing in the 90s and now are resuming it. So it just seems that things are escalating in a very different way.
Yes, let's go to our next story then, please. Right, this is CNN's headline. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum takes legal action after groping incident. Now, as we can see, Claudia Sheinbaum in the headline there. This happened in Mexico. A man broke through a crowd. Claudia Sheinbaum, the president, was walking around. The man is alleged to have been drunk, and there is footage that's gone viral of him grabbing her waist and then appearing to kiss her on the cheek. She is pressing charges, and she's doing this as a stand for what can and can't be acceptable in Mexican society now. So she's definitely taking this as an opportunity to make an example of what can and can't be done.
Exactly, and as you mentioned, it is a culture. She said it is a cultural thing that wants to be stamped out. She did say there's basically information is that she was harassed on public transport at the age of 12. She's been harassed by her professor, and it's not just a single incident. It's something that women in Mexico have experienced, and other women across the globe. If you remember the Spanish team, one of the players was also kissed on the mouth during a celebratory win, and that also drew a lot of media attention, especially because it was unwanted and unprovoked. So it's something that Mexico's president, Claudia Sheinbaum, is definitely wanting to stamp out, and as Lou, you mentioned, the guy has now been arrested, and the footage that I saw, it was quite striking, and it also begs the answer to say, where was her security team at that particular time? Someone did usher him out, but obviously it was way too late for when something like this, an indecent and inappropriate mishandling of her happened.
As a Mexican mayor was also assassinated very recently, it begs the question of why was she so open and exposed. But
yes, the good news is she did say that it will not stop her from obviously speaking to citizens and having a more open and conversational approach with them. She won't go into, for example, hiding or making sure that she doesn't have contact with the people in Mexico.
Right, let's go to our next story then, please. I'll let Nadia, you kick this one off.
Okay, so we did discuss this yesterday on the program, but Karabakh and Chelsea, they played yesterday night, and the score was 2-2, which I think is fantastic. Sorry that I'm just adding my own thing to that.
Celebrating a draw? Are you celebrating a draw?
Celebratory draw for Karabakh. I did say that I thought they could do well, and they have, in my opinion. But on A News website, it's stating that Karabakh and Chelsea level at 2-2 in Baku, and Leo, if I'm correct, you also went to the game yesterday.
Yes, and for the eagle-eyed viewers, you would have known that I said I might not be here today, but I am. That might be as a result of Chelsea not winning. I don't know. I got out alive. I'm safe. As a Chelsea fan in Baku. But it was actually a very interesting game. The atmosphere was roaring right from the off. I mean, the stadium was full. I have to give it to Carabao. They put on a hell of a show, and the first half was brilliant. They came out right at the blocks, and they deserved it. They really did at the beginning. But Garnacho came on early in the second half, scored. And that's, personally, I thought that was going to be it. The tide was going to change. Sadly, for me, that didn't. But, nonetheless, a great game, a great fixture. And the Champions League coming to Baku, never going to moan about that, are we? So we're just going to go through the Champions League results from yesterday. Do you want to start off?
Yes, so the first one, which I'm trying to make out, so if you can help me with this.
That's Paphos Villarreal.
Right, so that's 1 to Paphos and 0 to Villarreal. And the next one is Carabao and Chelsea, which we discussed, which is a 2-2. And the next one.
So that's Ajax is 0, Galatasaray 3. So Turkey, that's a Turkish team doing very well. Benfica 0, Bayer Leverkusen 1. Club Brugge 3-0 with Barcelona. It's a bit of a surprise. Inter Milan versus Kairat, Kazakhstan. Quite a surprise there, as Inter Milan only just squeaking away. But yeah, an interesting and eventful night in the Champions League, and a lot more to come tonight. But we will keep you up to date as Carabao's fixtures come through the calendar.
Thank you. Well, that's the press roundup. We're going to take a short break, but when we return, we'll discuss the top global stories. Stay with us.
And welcome to Primetime. What a show we've got lined up for you. In a complex world, clarity is power. Two hours live, diplomacy dissected in a spin-free environment. That's Prime Time with me, Guy Schoen, weekdays on A News.
Welcome back to A News. You're watching Daybreak. Now, over in Kentucky, and the black boxes from the UPS plane crash that killed at least 12 people on Tuesday have been recovered. However, authorities warn the death toll may continue to rise.
US federal safety investigators say they've located the black box recorders from the wreckage of a UPS cargo plane in Kentucky. The MD-11 went down on Tuesday shortly after takeoff from the Louisville Muhammad Ali International Airport, killing at least 12 people when it burst into flames. It left a trail of debris nearly a kilometre in length. Officials warn the number of fatalities may increase. The investigation into the cause is being led by the National Transportation Safety Board and will arrive on Thursday morning.
I've also spoken with a board member from the NTSB who will be arriving tomorrow before 10 a.m. There'll be 28 folks from NTSB coming. They're sending a large crew to do the investigation and deal with this disaster. As the governor said earlier, there was no hazardous cargo on board. Emergency management is continuing to monitor the air quality.
UPS has issued a statement saying it will cooperate with the NTSB and local authorities throughout the investigation. A state of emergency has been declared and the National Guard has been mobilised to help free up resources quickly. Officials say the runway where the accident happened is expected to remain closed for another 10 days. The other two have now reopened, allowing passenger flights to resume as the airport works through a significant backlog of delays.
In Belgium, several airports have reopened after being temporarily closed following reports of drones operating nearby. The disruption grounded dozens of flights and affected hundreds of passengers. The government has called an emergency meeting to discuss the incident. William Denslow reports from Brussels.
According to Belgian air traffic control, drones began to be spotted at around 8 p.m. local time on Tuesday evening. Subsequently, there were drone sightings at Liège Airport, a popular cargo hub for air transportation, as well as at several military sites as well. Now, for Brussels International Airport at Zaventem, the most busy airport in the country, well, this prompted a closure at the airline, and it's reported that hundreds of passengers were forced to spend the night at the airport. According to the flight tracking service FlightAware, roughly 10% of Brussels Airlines flights are facing disruptions into Wednesday.
I'm Ukrainian and I'm very much concerned that now in the heart of Europe we can see drones flying out of nowhere, and we have no means to prevent that or to fight that back for now.
Yeah, but not from here. Oh. It's from the other airport.
The second flight got cancelled, and we're booked on the third flight, but we don't want to fly anymore. So we're trying to reclaim our luggage, but also that's a slow process.
When it comes to what happens next, well, Belgium's National Security Council will be convening on Thursday to discuss this incident and broader threats when it comes to drone incursions. This is certainly not an isolated incident. There have been similar such occurrences over recent months, impacting a number of nations here in Europe. The likes of Romania, Poland, Denmark have all seen such drone incursions disrupting airspaces flights recently. When it comes to the causes of this, well, Russia has consistently rejected any allusions, any allegations that they might be responsible in such hybrid threats. But these incidents that we've seen over recent months has certainly garnered a strong response from both NATO and the European Union. As far as NATO is concerned, well, they've ramped up its eastern flank watch, increasing security along the borders with Belarus and Russia, doing more when it comes to more jets in that area. But NATO has acknowledged that sending jets or shooting missiles to shoot down very cheap drones is a non-efficient way of dealing with things. They're working on better ways to counter and detect such drone incursions in the future. As far as Brussels' response and that of the European Union, well, they are launching so-called drone wall plan, really to try and mitigate these threats across Europe. That is a plan that has been ramped up over recent months. This is certainly a threat that both NATO and the European Union is taking very seriously indeed. William Denslow, Frey News, Brussels.
US President Donald Trump said on Wednesday that the US may work with Russia and China on a plan to denuclearize without providing details. He called America the world's top nuclear power and warned that China could catch up within years.
Well, if you think about it, after the Second World War, they changed it to defense. We make the best equipment, the best missiles, the best rockets, the best everything. We redid our nuclear. We're the #1 nuclear power, which I hate to admit because it's so horrible. It's such a horrible situation if it ever has to be used. Russia's second, China's a distant third, but they'll catch us within 4 or 5 years. They want to catch us, and they'll be able to catch us. And we're maybe working on a plan to denuclearize the three of us. So we'll see if that works.
Now, fierce street fighting continues in Pokrovsk as Russian forces say they're pushing deeper into the city. Ukrainian troops say they're rushing reinforcements to hold key positions, while analysts warn the battle could soon turn in Moscow's favour.
Russian forces say they're tightening their hold on the strategic eastern Ukrainian city of Pokrovsk, with intense street fighting ongoing. The city, a key transport and logistical hub in Donetsk, faces the threat of near encirclement. Ukraine's general staff denies its troops are surrounded, saying reinforcements are being sent to the flanks around Pokrovsk and nearby Myrnohrad. President Volodymyr Zelensky recently visited troops north of the city to thank them for their defense. Once home to around 50,000 people, Pokrovsk has been largely abandoned. Its industrial facilities, including a technical university and coal mine, have been damaged or suspended. For Russia, capturing the city would open a pathway deeper into Donetsk. For Ukraine, losing it would be a serious tactical and psychological blow. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced plans to explore resuming nuclear testing, citing recent US statements on nuclear weapons as justification. Russia has already tested nuclear-powered weapons, including the Burevestnik missile and Poseidon underwater drone, but has not conducted a nuclear bomb test since the Soviet era. Ukraine has deployed special forces to try to shift momentum, but analysts warn the battle may already be heavily stacked against Kyiv.
Israel has received a body believed to be a deceased hostage on Wednesday. It was taken to National Forensics Institute for identification. Israeli authorities will confirm whether the remains belong to a hostage. If so, 6 hostages are still unaccounted for in Gaza under a ceasefire that began on the 10th of October. Hamas has released all 20 living hostages in exchange for nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners and wartime detainees held in Israel.
Now, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said he left a Supreme Court hearing on the legality of President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs, feeling it went. Apologies. Let's just run to our next pictures, please.
That we were at a tipping point in the economy with these trade deficits. That was a problem. And, sometimes the best tariffs are the ones that never get enforced. That, the president threatened 100% tariffs after the Chinese on October 8th threatened to put export controls on rare earth magnets from Chinese products that had 0.01%. Every camera, every iPhone here would have been subject to a Chinese control. Because he had the ability to threaten the 100% tariff, he was able to successfully execute on foreign policy.
Brazilians are voicing outrage after a police raid last month left more than 100 people dead. Residents are demanding to end the police violence as an investigation into the operation gets underway.
Hundreds of protesters gathered in Brazil's Rio de Janeiro on Wednesday to condemn a deadly police operation that left at least 121 people dead. The demonstration, organised by social movements, unions and lawmakers, marched towards the official residence of Rio's governor, Claudio Castro. They're demanding accountability from the local government and an end to what they describe as military incursions into favelas. The police operation on the 28th of August targeted the Comando Vermelho, Brazil's oldest active criminal organisation, as authorities moved to crack down on drug trafficking ahead of global climate events in the city. However, the activists described the raid as the deadliest in the city's history. The United Nations has also urged Brazil to reform its policing methods to ensure they comply with international standards on the use of force. Brazil's President, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, has said his government will seek an independent investigation.
We're going to take a quick break now, but when we get back, we'll discuss the key regional headlines with an in-studio guest to help us unpack more. Don't go anywhere.
And welcome to Primetime. What a show we've got lined up for you. In a complex world, clarity is power. Two hours live, diplomacy dissected in a spin-free environment. That's Prime Time with me, Guy Schoen, weekdays on A News.
Welcome back. Now let's take you through the news of what is happening across the region. Now, Turkey has become a key mediator in efforts to keep the Gaza ceasefire on track, a role praised by Washington. In recent days, Ankara has been stepping up, pushing for more humanitarian aid and hosting a major meeting of Muslim-majority countries in Istanbul to discuss both the truce and plans for an international stabilization force.
Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan says a UN mandate for that force is still being worked out, while Intelligence Chief Ibrahim Kalm has met with Hamas to coordinate the next phase from aid delivery to post-conflict rebuilding.
Well, joining us now to discuss this is Sultan Zahidov, leading advisor at the Center for International Relations. Thank you very much, Sultan, for joining us. Sultan, I just want to start with Turkey recently hosted its Muslim-majority one of the countries to talk about the Gaza stabilization force. How strong is Ankara's position at this point in time?
Well, it should be stated that as of today we are entering now the fourth week of the peace agreement on Gaza, which entered into force on October 10th. And unfortunately what we see is that the ceasefire remains fragile because there have been reports on the multiple violations of ceasefire by both parties in Gaza. So therefore, Turkey is indeed willing to ensure that ceasefire is lasting and durable. So to do so, Turkey is now in the process of negotiations with stakeholders, and therefore they hosted a meeting with some ministers and delegations of Arabic countries, Muslim countries, including Indonesia, Pakistan, UAE, Qatar. And there, the next phase of the peace deal was discussed among the parties. And what we see from the position of Turkey is that they, first of all, want to end of hostilities, to make sure that the ceasefire is not breached. Secondly, they want to ensure unhindered flow of humanitarian, let's say, aid to Gaza. Then they want to, let's say, take certain part in stabilization and reconstruction of Gaza. And ultimately, they also want that that Palestinians control Gaza and they ensure their own security. So this is the position of Turkey, and so far Turkey has been indeed a stabilizing force in not just in Gaza, in the entire Middle East, what we've seen in Syria and Libya, and once again in Gaza. They just want endurable stability, peace in that region. But of course there are numerous obstacles to that. One remaining obstacle is about the completion of the first phase of the Gaza peace deal, because we all know that Israel has tied the start of the negotiations over the second phase with the handover of the bodies, Israeli bodies. And as of today, Hamas handed over 22 out of 28, and 6, let's say, remains of Israelis are still in Gaza. But what Hamas says is that it's quite hard task for them to reveal those bodies because of the bombardment and massive destruction. So therefore, they need some time.
Well, just on that, Turkey's Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan has said there's still issues to resolve between Hamas and Israel. And it's just interesting to find out what exactly is Turkey's role or trying to mediate between both of these particular parties, and what are they trying to fix in regards to what needs to be resolved?
Well, as I already mentioned, there are certain things in which the parties disagree. For example, Israel has always been against the involvement of Palestinian Authority to this process. And what we also see from the position of Israel, that they are also against the involvement of Turkey, and especially the possible deployment of Turkish forces to Gaza, because various reports say that Turkey, as long as some other, let's say, Muslim countries, Indonesia, Pakistan, they might be dislocated to the area in order to ensure the ceasefire. So Israel is categorically against it, and indeed, if you look at the current ongoing discussions at Knesset in Israel, the leader of opposition, Yair Lapid, has been, let's say, criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu for bringing Turkey and Qatar to this process. So therefore, there are multiple obstacles, but nevertheless, for Turkey, I believe the most important, let's say, goal is not whether, let's say, Turkish forces are there or not. They want to ensure that the peace is durable there, because as of today, what we see, the ceasefire is still fragile, and as long as there is no involvement from the third parties, the likelihood of another large-scale escalation is quite high, because what we see from the previous ceasefire agreement, which was, let's say, concluded on January 19th, 2025, with the mediation of the United States, the previous one did not even last 2 months. After 2 months, it collapsed. It did not even enter the second stage. So therefore, Turkey does not want the peace agreement to have the fate of the first one, and it wants the peace and, let's say, to be sustainable
to last
in Gaza.
a lot longer than what it did in January. Okay,
yes.
Yeah.
Now let's talk a little bit about the regional cooperation, Azerbaijan and Turkey. The Shusha Declaration itself, a strong alliance established. Could we see Azerbaijan emerge as a key player in this peace effort going forwards?
Well, definitely, because as we already mentioned, as Azerbaijan has been quite an active player in, let's say, furthering peace among the stakeholders in the Middle East. We can speak about facilitation by Azerbaijan, negotiations between Israel and Turkey, which happened recently in Baku, or Israel and Syria. Taking those facts into consideration, Azerbaijan might be invited to take part in Gaza peace facilitation process as well, because why Azerbaijan? First of all, Azerbaijan does not have any other ambitions other than, once again, promoting peace and security in the region. Secondly, I believe the stakeholders will trust Azerbaijan as well. Both Turkey and Israel would trust Azerbaijan's roles in this process. And therefore, I believe Azerbaijan might indeed contribute to the lasting peace in Gaza, and make sure that this ceasefire is durable, and finally peace prevails in that region.
And just on that, if Israel decides to block Turkish troops on the ground, do you think therefore Azerbaijan's role could basically be more increased and involve more compromise in regards to the ties between Tel Aviv and Ankara? Just because if Israel says, no, we don't want Turkish troops on their ground, does Azerbaijan step in more and provide more of a different role there?
Well, this is a little bit challenging question because indeed there were multiple reports in Politico and some other media outlets that Azerbaijan, Indonesia and Pakistan are the leading candidates to participate in Gaza ceasefire. But nevertheless, we don't know the official position of Azerbaijan with respect to that yet. But looking from this perspective that Israel is against Turkey and Turkey would not oppose participation of Azerbaijan, there is such possibility. But of course we should wait for first of all for the official position of Azerbaijan and then let's say speak about this deployment. As of today we don't know about it yet, but there is such possibility. And what I know is that United States, as of today, is planning to submit the draft of the resolution on the deployment of international stabilization forces. Recently, according to Axios, they met with the US ambassador to the United Nations, Mike Waltz, met with Palestinian delegation in New York to discuss it. And what's stated is that United States wants to end this process in 2 weeks to make sure that the stabilization forces are already deployed there by January 2026. Because without, as I already mentioned, involvement of the third parties and their forces, because those forces will be responsible for ensuring peace, for securing the borders, protecting the civilians. Without that involvement, I believe the ceasefire will still remain fragile.
I have a couple of questions. Firstly, on what you mentioned. Is there a risk that if Turkey deployed troops to Gaza, that we see an escalation in conflict potentially between the IDF and Turkish forces? And on that, I just want to take a more diplomatic, I know it's a bit of a mouthful to answer all this, but do we see Turkey's cooperation with Hamas and trying to balance EU and NATO relations as a conflict of interest?
Well, there is indeed a conflict of interest because this is what Turkey has been demanding. For example, what Hakan Fidan stated is that, first of all, we need to make sure that international stabilization forces, they are granted with legitimacy, with mandate by United Nations, to know what is the scope and what are the duties of that mission. Because what will happen if there is an escalation between Turkish forces there and Israeli troops, because Israeli troops, as we all know, they have not been completely withdrawn from the Gaza. They have just, they still hold 53% of the Gaza's territories. And therefore, first of all, Turkey wants to make sure that the role of the mission is clearly defined. And then only after that, Turkey would be ready to deploy its forces. But then on the other hand, yes, Israel is against it, and therefore there is always a possibility of escalation. So hence, these matters are subject of negotiations as of today, and let's see what's going to be the result.
Thank you very much for your insights today.
It was a pleasure for me. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Zahidov. Armenia and Turkey have reached an agreement to expand air connections between two countries. That's according to the Armenian Foreign Minister Ararat Mirzoyan. Alongside current flights between Turkey and Yerevan, he said that new routes were being planned to link several Turkish cities with Armenia's second largest city, Gyumri. He said the decision is part of the ongoing process to normalize bilateral relations.
Now, EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said on Wednesday that Turkey continues to be a fundamental partner for the bloc and an important regional player. Here's Alia Iman with more.
EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas stated that Turkey remains a key partner for the European Union during the launch of the bloc's 2025 enlargement package in Brussels. Kallas says enlargement is not only a political priority, but a geopolitical need, especially with the war in Ukraine continuing to reshape Europe's security landscape. She emphasized that the EU and Turkey are engaged on multiple issues of common interests, from trade and energy to regional stability. But she also noted that the decline of democratic standards, judicial independence, and fundamental rights has effectively frozen Turkey's accession process since 2018. Kallas added that strengthening the rule of law, fighting corruption, and supporting independent media are essential for both national and European security. She ruled out that any shortcuts to membership are not an option. EU Foreign Policy Chief said Turkey remains a strategic partner, with 2030 set as a realistic timeframe for potential new EU members. Turkish officials stressed that the EU's enlargement policy should include Turkey, citing its long-standing candidacy and vital role in regional stability, migration, and defense. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says Turkey's goal of full EU membership and calls for the removal of what he calls political blockages in the accession process. Recently, Turkey rejected the European Commission's latest report as biased, claiming it contains unfounded allegations and uses language inconsistent with efforts to build a positive Turkey-EU agenda. Also at the same time, Turkey emphasized its continued commitment to EU membership and regional stability. This is Aliye Iman, Istanbul, Turkey, A News.
Staying on Turkey, and the 15th of December has officially been proclaimed World Turkic Language Family Day, an historic recognition from UNESCO. The decision, adopted during the 43rd General Conference in Samarkand, has drawn warm reactions across the Turkic world. The Secretary General of the Organization of Turkic States welcomed the decision, noting that recognition by the world's leading institution for cultural and linguistic diversity reflects the growing global role of the Turkic world. Azerbaijan also praised the move, describing it as a tribute to the Turkic world's centuries-old linguistic and cultural heritage. Those were your regional headlines. We'll be back after a short break, where we'll be joined by another guest to talk through the global stories.
Welcome to A News, unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent. Hello, I'm Jay. Challenges. Today is the third. We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories. Welcome to Gabala. Hi, Candy. One important note to this. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we are reporting on the 8th of November.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul, for A News.
Well, hello and welcome to Prime Time. What a show we've got lined up for you. In a complex world, clarity is power. Two hours live, diplomacy dissected in a spin-free environment. That's Prime Time with me, Guy Schoen, weekdays on A News.
Welcome back to Daybreak. It's 10 minutes to 10 a.m. and we're now going to dive into exploring our global story in greater detail. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with foreign ministers from 5 Central Asian countries on Wednesday. He said he plans to visit them next year. The meeting comes ahead of a summit between President Trump and the region's leaders on Thursday, where talks are expected on rare earth minerals and other resources.
First, I do want to thank Ambassador Gore and Deputy Secretary Landau for the trip they took last week. It was important. They spent a substantial amount of time, and I know they look forward to going back to the other countries they were not able to visit. I personally intend to visit in the coming year as well, and all 5. So I know it'll probably be a week-long or longer trip. So we got to work on that and make that happen together. And I think it's an exciting opportunity and a new era in our relationship in Central Asia, which I think it's been about 10 years since there was a gathering of this kind. So it's been over a decade.
Well, we're now going to head over to Nadia, who's joined live with a guest.
I am indeed, thanks Lou. So I'm now joined by Nubalat Nishambayev, an associate professor at Tehran University in Almaty, Kazakhstan. Welcome.
Hello, thank you.
My first question, Mr. Nishambayev, how can the US deepen relationships with these 5 countries and expand its presence in the region with growing competition from China and Russia?
Exactly. I think US has a long-term strategic plan in Central Asia, because in the last few years we see the role of China is rising in terms of economy and trades, but in terms of Russia stays vitally important in terms of securities. But however, we have realized that in the last few years, China and Russia having pretty similar approaches to Central Asian countries. Therefore, the United States in Central Asia, I think, will create a balance among the great powers in our region. So therefore, the active influence of United States in terms of logistics, in terms of investment, in terms of private sector definitely will help to keep in shape the Central Asian foreign policy, so-called multi-vector foreign policies, in balance for the upcoming decades, at least I think.
I see, and it's widely also expected that this meeting will focus on a broad range of topics like economic cooperation. And we just heard there that Rubio says that he will be visiting the 5 Central Asian countries next year. How significant is that? And what is the US foreign policy for Central Asia?
Yes, definitely. Since the independence, since the collapse of the USSR, not any single United States president visited to Central Asian countries. We have seen in 2011 in Astana, during the OBSE summit, State Secretary then Hillary Clinton visited in Kazakhstan. But I think next year's planned visit of Marco Rubio to Central Asia will create trustworthy and sustainable relations, and I think will shape the already established bilateral relation between Central Asia and the United States. Because now we see The stage of the cooperation between those two parts in the field of investment, in the field of investing on rare resource materials, natural resources, because the demand is rising in the global market. So upcoming planned visit of the Marco Rubio, I think, will probably establish a new step American and Central Asian relations, because he mentioned he will visit all the 5 states. So it shows to what extent C5+1 is working. United States started to see those 5 states as equal partners, as a single regions. So I think this is the victory of the diplomacy for the long term.
Definitely. Well, we'll see how it goes. Their meeting is today with President Donald Trump and how things go there. Thank you so much for joining me, Mr. Nishanbayev. Well, that's a wrap of our Global Talk. We'll be now taking another short break. Don't go anywhere.
And welcome to Primetime. What a show we've got lined up for you. In a complex world, clarity is power. Two hours live, diplomacy dissected in a spin-free environment. That's Prime Time with me, Guy Schoen, weekdays on A News. Watching Daybreak here on A News. Here are the top stories. Here are today's top stories. US government shutdown enters 36th day to become the longest in history.
Russian forces appear to tighten grip on strategic Ukrainian city of Pokrovsk.
And Hamas hands over another coffin containing a body of an Israeli captive. The US government shutdown has now lasted for 36 days, setting a new record for the longest closure in US history. The closure began on the 1st of October and is due to Congress not being able to agree to new funding. The implications of this has meant air traffic controllers have had to work without pay. And now for the Federal Aviation Administration has ordered a 10% cut in flights at 40 major airports to reduce pressure and maintain safety.
10% of flights at 40 major American airports could be cut from Friday if the US government shutdown continues. That's according to US Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy and the FAA Administrator Brian Bedford. More than 2,100 flights were delayed on Wednesday. It's after the shutdown entered its 36th day on Wednesday, making it the longest in American history. The Transportation Secretary says the reductions are aimed at easing pressure on overworked air traffic controllers.
There will be frustration. We are working with the airlines. They're going to work with passengers. But in the end, our sole role is to make sure that we keep this airspace as safe as possible. The administrator is going to talk about all of the tools we're going to deploy.
The cuts are expected to impact the nation's busiest airports, including New York, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Atlanta, Los Angeles and Dallas, potentially cancelling up to 1,800 flights and could affect more than 268,000 airline seats. International flights will initially be exempt.
But we do recognize that the controllers have been working fastidiously for the last 5 weeks with this huge burden over their head of lack of compensation. And we are starting to see some evidence that that fatigue is building in the system in ways that we feel we need to work towards relieving some of that pressure.
President Donald Trump said the shutdown is affecting the economy and GOP political standing. Speaking to Republican senators, he pushed for ending the filibuster to speed up legislation.
But countless public servants are now not being paid, and the air traffic control system is under increasing strain. We must get the government back open soon, and really immediately. We have to get it up. We have the hottest economy we've ever had, and it's affecting the stock market now a little bit.
Since the 1st of October, hundreds of thousands of federal workers have gone without pay, and essential services nationwide have been disrupted, putting millions of Americans at risk of losing health and food assistance.
Over to Kentucky, and the black boxes from the UPS plane crash that killed at least 12 people on Tuesday have been recovered. However, authorities warn the death toll may continue to rise.
US federal safety investigators say they've located the black box recorders from the wreckage of a UPS cargo plane in Kentucky. The MD-11 went down on Tuesday shortly after takeoff from the Louisville Muhammad Ali International Airport, killing at least 12 people when it burst into flames. It left a trail of debris nearly a kilometre in length. Officials warn the number of fatalities may increase. The investigation into the cause is being led by the National Transportation Safety Board and will arrive on Thursday morning.
I've also spoken with a board member from the NTSB who will be arriving tomorrow before 10 a.m. There'll be 28 folks from NTSB coming. They're sending a large crew to do the investigation and deal with this disaster. As the governor said earlier, there was no hazardous cargo on board. Emergency management is continuing to monitor the air quality.
UPS has issued a statement saying it will cooperate with the NTSB and local authorities throughout the investigation. A state of emergency has been declared, and the National Guard has been mobilized to help free up resources quickly. Officials say the runway where the accident happened is expected to remain closed for another 10 days. The other two have now reopened, allowing passenger flights to resume as the airport works through a significant backlog of delays.
Israel received a body believed to be deceased hostage on Wednesday. The body was taken to the National Forensics Institute for identification. Israeli authorities will confirm whether the remains belong to a hostage. If so, 6 hostages are still unaccounted for in Gaza. Under a ceasefire that began on the 10th of October, Hamas has released all 20 living hostages in exchange for nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners and wartime detainees held in Israel.
Now, fierce street fighting continues in Pokrovsk as Russian forces say they're pushing deeper into the city. Ukrainian troops say they're rushing reinforcements to hold key positions, while analysts warn the battle could soon turn in Moscow's favor.
Russian forces say they're tightening their hold on the strategic eastern Ukrainian city of Pokrovsk, with intense street fighting ongoing. The city, a key transport and logistical hub in Donetsk, faces the threat of near encirclement. Ukraine's general staff denies its troops are surrounded, saying reinforcements are being sent to the flanks around Pokrovsk and nearby Myrnohrad. President Volodymyr Zelensky recently visited troops north of the city to thank them for their defense. Once home to around 50,000 people, Pokrovsk has been largely abandoned. Its industrial facilities, including a technical university and coal mine, have been damaged or suspended. For Russia, capturing the city would open a pathway deeper into Donetsk. For Ukraine, losing it would be a serious tactical and psychological blow. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced plans to explore resuming nuclear testing, citing recent US statements on nuclear weapons as justification. Russia has already tested nuclear-powered weapons, including the Burevestnik missile and Poseidon underwater drone, but has not conducted a nuclear bomb test since the Soviet era. Ukraine has deployed special forces to try to shift momentum, but analysts warn the battle may already be heavily stacked against Kyiv.
US President Donald Trump said on Wednesday that the US may work with Russia and China on a plan to denuclearize without providing any details. He called America the world's top nuclear power and warned that China could catch up within years.
Well, if you think about it, after the Second World War, they changed it to defense. We make the best equipment, the best missiles, the best rockets, the best everything. We redid our nuclear. We're the #1 nuclear power, which I hate to admit because it's so horrible. It's such a horrible situation if it ever has to be used. Russia's second, China's a distant third, but they'll catch us within 4 or 5 years. They want to catch us, and they'll be able to catch us, and we're maybe working on a plan to denuclearize the 3 of us, so we'll see if that works.
Now, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said he left a Supreme Court hearing on the legality of President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs, feeling it had gone very well for the administration. However, the US Supreme Court justices voiced doubts on Wednesday about the legality of the tax hike measures, a case with implications for the global economy and a significant test of the president's powers. Bessent said Trump's use of the levies had been effective in carrying out foreign policy.
That we were at a tipping point in the economy with these trade deficits. That was a problem. And, you know, sometimes the best tariffs are the ones that never get enforced. That, you know, the president threatened 100% tariffs after the Chinese on October 8th threatened to put export controls on rare earth magnets from Chinese products that had 0.01%. Every camera, every iPhone here would have been subject to a Chinese control. Because he had the ability to threaten the 100% tariff, he was able to successfully execute on foreign policy.
US Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with foreign ministers from 5 Central Asian countries on Wednesday. He said the plans to visit them next year. The meeting comes ahead of a summit between President Trump and the region's leaders on Thursday, where talks are expected on rare earth minerals and other resources.
First, I do want to thank Ambassador Gore and Deputy Secretary Landau for the trip they took last week. It was important. They spent a substantial amount of time, and I know they look forward to going back to the other countries they were not able to visit. I personally intend to visit in the coming year as well, and all 5. So I know it'll probably be a week-long or longer trip. So we got to work on that and make that happen together. And I think it's an exciting opportunity and a new era in our relationship in Central Asia, which I think it's been about 10 years since there was a gathering of this kind. So it's been over a decade.
Well, thousands of families in northern Afghanistan are now without shelter after a 6.3 magnitude earthquake struck on Monday, with families facing cold nights outdoors. Here's more on that story.
Families in northern Afghanistan are facing freezing nights outdoors after a 6.3 magnitude earthquake struck on Monday. At least 27 people were killed and hundreds of homes were destroyed, leaving many without shelter as winter begins. Aid organizations say shelter and basic supplies are urgently needed. In villages around Mazar-e Sharif, large areas of housing have collapsed.
Our future is completely uncertain. We don't know where to go. The government hasn't promised us any place where we could build a house and settle. About 2 or 3 nights ago, the earthquake started very violently. As you can see, our houses were destroyed and buried under the rubble. And we haven't been able to recover anything from under the debris so far. There is danger. It's winter and the weather is very cold. Our children have a high fever because the past few nights have been extremely cold. We have nowhere to go. Our entire house has been destroyed. Even this land is no longer usable. The ground is completely cracked and ruined.
Local officials report that hundreds of houses were either heavily damaged or reduced to rubble. Residents say the earthquake struck with little warning, giving them limited time to leave their homes. Nighttime temperatures in the region have already dropped below freezing. Many families are currently using temporary coverings or open areas to stay overnight, and health concerns are increasing, particularly for children. The earthquake adds to challenges already facing Afghanistan, including reduced international assistance and the recent return of Afghan nationals from neighboring countries. The disaster comes at the start of winter, when humanitarian needs are expected to rise.
The Chinese fast fashion retailer Shein has opened its first permanent retail store in Paris, inside the BHV department store. This move has drawn immediate criticism regarding its low-cost business model and its effect on traditional French retailers. Here's more.
Dozens of shoppers lined up outside the 19th century BHV department store in Paris's Marais district before the opening of the online fast fashion retailer Shein's first ever permanent shop on Wednesday. Amid fierce criticism of its low-cost business model, Shein's store has caused an uproar from lawmakers across party lines and politicians including Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo, as well as retailers who say that Shein's business model has an unfair advantage and has eroded French high streets. French authorities had already threatened a ban of the platform on Monday over childlike sex dolls found on its site by France's consumer watchdog. A number of French clothing retailers have decided to close their outlets at the BHV in response to the arrival of the Chinese brand. Other Shein outlets will open later in Galeries Lafayette department stores in 5 regional cities.
Well, Europe's Champions League nights never fail to grab attention, and Wednesday was no exception. From Chelsea's draw in Baku to Galatasaray's commanding win in Amsterdam and Inter, Leverkusen and Manchester City all claiming vital victories, the group stage is heating up.
Europe stayed on edge Wednesday as the Champions League brought key results from across the continent. Chelsea were held 2-2 by Karabakh FK in Baku. Estevo opened the scoring for Chelsea, but Leandro Andrade and Marko Jankovic steered the hosts into a 2-1 lead before Alejandro Garnacho struck soon after the break to level. The draw leaves Chelsea's hopes of automatic qualification in question. Galatasaray defeated Ajax 3-0 in Amsterdam, with Victor Osimhen scoring all 3 goals in the second half, including 2 penalties. The result leaves Ajax rooted at the bottom of their group and Galatasaray moving upward in the standings. Bayer 0-4 Leverkusen edged Benfica 1-0 in Lisbon, with Patrick Schick scoring the only goal in the 65th minute after a tight contest. Inter Milan beat Kairat Almaty of Kazakhstan 2-1 at the Giuseppe Meazza. Lautaro Martinez opened the scoring, Kairat equalised through Arad, and Carlos Augusto sealed the win in the 67th minute. Manchester City kept the spirit with a 4-1 victory over Borussia Dortmund at the Etihad Stadium. Phil Foden scored twice, Erling Haaland added his 18th goal of the season, and Ryan Cherki capped the win late while Waldemar Anton pulled one back for Dortmund. City now have 10 points from 4 matches. With all 36 teams now through at least one match in the group phase, every result matters as the race for the knockout rounds intensifies across Europe.
Let's take a short break. When we return, we'll get some more information from our US correspondent on other news making the headlines.
Welcome to A News, unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent.
Challenges.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories.
Welcome to Gabala. One important note. To first. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we are reporting on the 8th of November.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul, for A News.
Welcome back to Daybreak. Now, the presidents of the Central Asia countries will meet with President Trump today. Ubi Shambanda brings us the key expectations for what this summit will present.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio hosted the foreign ministers of Central Asian states on Wednesday as the C5+1 summit kicks off with meetings scheduled between Central Asian heads of state and President Trump throughout the week. President of Kazakhstan, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, arrived in Washington, D.C., where he is expected to sign hundreds of billions of dollars worth of deals, including crypto and critical mineral mining with American companies. Kazakhstan supplies over 45% of the world's uranium, and enhancing its partnership with Washington could help the U.S. secure energy resilience and help Kazakhstan secure major American investments. The summit in Washington will address mineral processing, trade routes, strategic partnerships, and defense ties amid Washington's growing concerns of China's dominance of rare earth mineral exports. China currently maintains a powerful grip on the global supply chains for these elements, commanding more than 70% of global rare earth mining. And as the U.S. government shutdown enters yet another week, there are growing concerns that will lead to major air travel disruptions. Starting Friday, the Transportation Department will cut scheduled flights by 10% at 40 major airports unless Congress reaches a deal to continue to fund the federal government. President Trump has said that if the Democrats agree to open the government and end the shutdown, he could be open to making a deal. The president said that the United States cannot afford to be extorted and to give $1.5 trillion to people who came into the country illegally, which he believes is the Democratic Party's plan and why Democratic Party leadership continues to refuse to pass a funding bill. President Trump blasted the Democrats' demands, and the government shutdown continues to drag on. This has been your update from Washington, D.C. I'm Ube Shabander, A News.
Now, Europe is walking a fine line between trade, security and climate priorities, from new EU-China rare earth agreements and drone disruptions in Belgium to a last-minute climate deal ahead of COP30 in Brazil. The bloc faces both challenges and opportunities. Now let's go to Anita Sharma with the latest developing stories from across Europe.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, with a focus on rare earths, drone attacks in Belgium, and a climate deal hashed out just ahead of COP30 in Brazil, which gets underway today. First, the EU and China announced a new special channel designed to fast-track export licenses for rare earth materials essential for wind turbines and high-tech manufacturing for civilian and military use. After months of concern over China's tighter export controls, Brussels secured this mechanism to prioritize European applications and expedite supply chain access. EU Trade Commissioner Maruš Šefčovič says about 2,000 applications have been submitted by European firms, with just over half approved so far. He also says he discussed the issue directly with China's Commerce Minister and emphasized that poorly managed export procedures could have, quote, a very negative impact on production and manufacturing in the EU. Firms are eager to see which ones get priority status and whether this signals a deeper strategic shift in Europe's industrial policy posture toward China. Europe is keen to move from a vulnerable supply chain relying heavily on China to more strategic autonomy by diversifying in and outside Europe. This, as China clearly dominates rare earth mining and processing. There's also growing alarm in Belgium after its busiest airport in Brussels, plus Liège, were forced to shut down this week due to drone sightings. Flight diversions, delays, and disruptions raised fresh concern over civilian air traffic security. Some experts say that at least one of the recently sighted drones appeared to be a non-civilian type, or more bluntly, a military type of drone. The Interior Minister says Belgium will not allow its airports to be disrupted by uncontrolled drone flights and that it requires, quote, a coordinated national response. The Belgian Security Council is holding an emergency meeting today, but Defense Minister Theo Franken has already said the incidents appear to be coordinated to create disruption and, quote, are in line with the hybrid techniques seen in other countries. In recent months, drones repeatedly disrupted air traffic across Europe, prompting temporary shutdowns at several airports. Some European officials suspect the incidents may be linked to Russia, an allegation Moscow firmly denies. And finally, today, an EU delegation is in Belém, Brazil for COP30. Just ahead of the climate summit, during an overnight marathon debate, the EU finalized a new 2040 climate target deal, which entails a 90% emissions cut versus 1990 levels, but with key flexibilities. Member states will be allowed to count foreign carbon credits for up to 5% of the goal and consider another 5% in the future. Environmentalists criticize the deal for provisions that will allow the EU to buy carbon credits from less developed countries, effectively outsourcing the bloc's obligations. Now, it's also important to note that Europe's scramble for rare earths opens the door wide open to even more pollution through mining and processing. Overall, these stories reflect the tightrope Europe must walk across trade, security, and climate. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
And finally, we turn to the subject of rice. Greek farmers are tapping into a new revenue stream and selling their cheap broken rice to wedding goers, labelling it as wedding rice. This new initiative is helping farmers repurpose broken, inedible rice instead of discarding it. The tradition of tossing the grain over newlyweds has become a wasteful problem in the country, say farmers. But Greece is the European Union's third largest producer, exporting most of its 250,000-ton annual production. However, the sector is struggling with fierce competition from low-cost imports from South Asia and recent droughts in Greece's agricultural areas. What do you think? Rice at your wedding?
What kind of rice are they using?
It wasn't that specific, actually.
Basmati,
it was
jasmine.
broken rice, wherever that rice is. But yeah, I don't know. It's still a tradition. I don't normally, at weddings that I've attended, rice is no longer.
You've not seen that before?
No, because they say it's harmful to birds.
I think that's a myth, actually. I read it this morning. But I saw this story coming up, and I took the liberty ahead of this.
Yes.
And I have a few fun things for you.
Tell me what you know. Tell me what you know.
The studio are going to be quite shocked when they see this, so there's nothing they can do now. So in the light of weddings and traditions, I had to look up similar things. So let's start with the country, Nigeria.
Okay.
They have something called a money dance. Can you have a guess what that is?
I do, because I've been to one of those.
Really?
So I do understand the money dance, and it is very lucrative for the couple.
Yeah.
So a lot of money is sprayed, and it symbolises the same thing that when rice is also sprayed, like prosperity, health, fertility, kind of like prospering within your marriage. So all of that type of stuff.
Okay, you've clearly got me there. But okay, let's try another one.
Yeah.
Sweden, coins in shoes. Can you guess what that is?
No, that's different.
So the bride's father places a silver coin in her left shoe and her mother a gold coin in her right, meaning a wish for her never to go without money or happiness.
Wow, that's going to be quite painful as she walks down the aisle.
Very materialistic, all of these, aren't they?
Well, you need money in a wedding.
I know, but
you spend a lot of
money. It's about love and happiness, isn't it?
Yeah, that doesn't last. I'm joking, it does.
Money lasts longer though.
It does.
Let's go with Korea. Wild ducks or geese? It's a bit more interesting.
Wild ducks or geese?
Do you want to know?
Yes.
Traditionally, the groom presents a wooden duck or goose to the bride's family, meaning these birds mate for life, so they symbolise a faithfulness and lasting love.
That's very nice.
I like the Korean one.
I do. I think I'll stick to the money one. I think I like the Nigerian
you might be more
symbolism of that. And yeah, I could always do with some more in my pocket. But thank you.
Or in your shoes if you're in Sweden.
Or in my shoe if I'm in Sweden. Thank you so much for watching Daybreak today with me, Nadia Jani.
And me, Lou Brown. And from all of us in the studio, thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.